At 12:17 a.m., the clock radio blinked. With my back to the door, I feigned sleep as its digital glow cut through the darkness of our bedroom, but I was screaming inside. Hours had passed while I lay there, mentally reliving the same heartbreaking scene. The image of her car pulling into the driveway, the mattress dipped next to me, a familiar weight, but tonight it felt strange and pulsing. She told me she would be home from her late shift at the hospital 10 minutes earlier than usual. As she slipped beneath the covers, I could hear her breathing and the soft rustle of her clothing. The rhythm of our lives mingled, and I used to find solace in that sound. Now, it was the sound of betrayal. Every muscle in my body was clenched so tightly that I was afraid I might break, so I didn't move and dared not show that I was awake. In my throat, I could almost taste the metallic tang of hurt and rage. She sat next to me, a silent intruder in our common area, and I waited, breath held, listening. Then I heard a sharp intake of air, followed by a soft gasp. Her breath caught, then ceased completely. I nearly gave in to the overwhelming urge to comfort her for what seemed like an eternity. But then I remembered the text messages I had discovered, the ones I shouldn't have seen, and a wave of disgust smothered the urge. The letter had been located. I rolled over and made myself look at her, her eyes wide with a fear I had never seen before, the pale moonlight pouring in through the window illuminating her face. She held on to the one piece of paper as if it were a deadly snake. Her mouth quivered as she started reading the words I had laboriously composed, each one tinged with the suffering she had caused me. The letter was about the hollow ache in my chest and the sense of complete isolation in my own marriage, not really about anger. It described how a strange, icy chill had taken the place of the light in our house. It ended with the heartbreaking phrase, "I know about," and talked of broken trust and a future I could no longer imagine with her. Her face was a mask of fear as she gazed up at me. "How are you aware?" Her voice was hardly audible as she whispered, "Does it make a difference?" I questioned in a flat, emotionless voice. In the harsh, cold light of reality, I was eerily calm. Even though I had pictured this moment 1,000 times over the previous few weeks, each time ending with me screaming, yelling, and possibly even crying. She simply stared at the letter as if it contained the answers to all of life's unanswerable questions without responding. "Now it doesn't matter," I went on, steadily and quietly. "It's over. I've known Ally for weeks. The late shifts that weren't mine, the whispered phone conversations, the perfume that wasn't mine." Silent and powerless, tears ran down her cheeks. Her voice cracked as she pleaded, "Please, Steve, please don't. I made an error, a mistake." The phrase tasting like ash came back to me. "No, Ally, this was not an accident. Rather, it was a deliberate choice that you repeatedly made, betraying me and us each time, and now you must live with that." I got out of bed and started getting dressed. The woman in front of me was a stranger, and the silence between us was full of unspoken words of regret and recrimination. I found it impossible to reconcile this dishonest version of my wife with the kind, considerate one I believed I knew. "Where are you heading?" When she did ask, her voice was weak and small. I put on my shoes and replied, "To visit someone." I didn't need to go into further detail. She was aware that the drive to his house was a haze. By the time I parked outside his house, my hands were shaking and my knuckles were white from gripping the steering wheel so tightly. The anger was building into a raging inferno that was ready to explode. I had no idea how I got there. Every mile was a knife twist, and every passing car was a reminder of the happiness I'd been so recklessly denied. Wearing shorts and a t-shirt, he answered the door with the same arrogant expression that I had seen in the pictures I had discovered on Ally's phone. Young, arrogant, and without any sense of decency, he was a perfect representation of everything I was not. He asked with an unwavering smug smile, "Can I help you?" "I believe so," I said in a low, threatening voice. Steve, my husband, went pale, and a flash of fear took the place of his smug expression. He attempted to slam the door, but I was too fast, forcing my way through the gap and into the unclean. Animalistic, I finally let loose the anger I had been holding inside because you had been having an affair with my wife. A poisonous hiss escaped my lips as I spoke. I wanted him to see the devastation he had caused and to know what he had done. I wasn't paying attention to his stuttering and stammering attempts to deny it. I took hold of his shirt collar and drew him in. Do you really believe that you can simply walk into someone else's life and take what isn't rightfully yours? You believed you could avoid consequences. My voice trembled with anger rather than fear. At last, I was getting angry. Then I said very little more. I simply beat him and let go of all the hurt and annoyance I had been holding inside. He was curled on the floor, whimpering in agony, and I beat him until my knuckles were split and bleeding. I didn't care. It felt good, even cathartic at the time, and he deserved it. I walked out into the night, leaving him there, a broken mess on the floor of his living room. I felt like I could breathe for the first time in weeks because the air was cool, but the fight I had didn't make the betrayal any less painful. Even though I had exacted my revenge, nothing had changed. The weeks that followed were a haze of attorneys, paperwork, and the gradual, excruciating breakdown of our shared life. Ali left home. She tried to explain herself and apologize, but I couldn't stand to hear her voice. News of her adultery spread like wildfire, and the picture of her holding that letter and the terrified expression in her eyes served as a continual reminder of what we had lost, or rather, what she had thrown away. It was a small town. After all, she was constantly reminded of her embarrassment by the judging looks and the whispers that followed her. Her life, which she so readily risked, fell apart around her when her friends, our friends, left her. His life was also not spared. He lost his job, his friends, and his social standing after word spread that he was the town's golden boy, making him a pariah who was not allowed to show his face in public. As a victim of circumstance and the wronged husband, I, on the other hand, had gained sympathy and support from others. They expressed their admiration for my fortitude and tenacity, but I didn't feel that way. I had nothing. I went through the motions, paying my bills, going to work, and doing everything I had always done. But even now, years later, without her by my side, my heart felt like it had been torn out. Pain persists. Occasionally I question what went wrong when our love began to fade. But then I recall the letter and her expression, and I realize that some things are unforgivable and that some wounds never fully mend.